So, and of course it's my opinion it's a bad decision. Not other people's opinions disagree, I'm sure. Not everybody thinks it's bad, clearly. I just have a soft spot for pre-licensing students. That's really what it boils down to for me. That's where my anger comes from about it, is for you guys. All right, antitrust laws. This is something you are going to see for sure on a pre-license exam, on a final exam, on a state license exam. Probably in the national section of the exam. This will be a national section thing, not a state-specific section thing. Antitrust laws are federal laws that are designed to promote competition, not collusion. We don't want to see real estate brokers and real estate firms working together to stifle competition. How could you stifle competition as a real estate broker or firm? Well, give me some examples of stifling competition. Go ahead.
Everything's the same.
Everything's the same. Everything's the same price. If you call 15 real estate firms and they all said, well, it's 6%. After a while, as a consumer, you start to ask what?
Are they related to the fuel stations?
Why are they related to the gas station? Why do they all charge the same thing? Why do they all charge it? I mean, it can't be all the same. And that's why we're very susceptible or open to these kind of complaints as real estate brokers. We have to be very careful about this as real estate brokers. Here's the basic idea. First of all, this is called price fixing. Price fixing is any time brokers or firms make it sound as if everybody charges the same thing. So there's a lot of various ways you could make it sound like everybody charges the same thing. You could say, well, this is the normal rate. Don't say that. This is the average rate. Don't say that. Because here's the thing. You shouldn't be an expert on what anybody charges except who? You and your firm. So how do you respond to a pricing question from a consumer? What do you say? This is my rate. This is what I charge. This is what my firm charges. This is what we charge. And what if they say, well, I've talked to 6 of you all charge the same thing. What do you say? I can't explain that. I don't know why they charge what they charge, but we charge. You just double right back to what you charge, what we charge, what my firm charges. Does that make sense for everybody? Because the law says that commissions always have to be negotiable. And what that means is that the client, the customer should understand, the consumer should understand that they have the right to talk to more than one firm, and they should have the right to find different pricing. Because if they start to feel like everybody charges the same thing, they're not going to shop around. Does that make sense for everybody? And the idea is to have a competitive marketplace where they do shop around. So commissions should always be negotiable. The client should always feel that they are negotiable. Can you have a set commission for your firm? Of course you can. And some people say, well, that's not negotiable. Yes, it is, because they don't have to do what? They don't have to hire you. They don't have to accept it. The big thing is they need to understand that just because they're not willing to pay you 6% doesn't mean they're shut out of the market. Could they find somebody else who would do it for 5%? Probably so. They just have to look for it. Is everybody following me on that mindset? Okay. That's called price fixing. Now, I've added a slide here, and you need to add this information to your notes. There is another type of antitrust activity that you need to be aware of for the test called group boycotting. Group boycotting. If you're boycotting something, what are you doing? You're not doing it. You're not participating with it. You're not hiring that person. You're not going to their party. You're not attending their event. And so put the word group with it. What is group boycotting? A group of you has decided what? Not to purchase from this person, not to hire this person, not to attend this person's events. So let me ask you this. What if a real estate firm moved to town and they were doing what you consider to be discount brokerage. In other words, they were listing properties for 4%, and you charge 6%. Might that upset you a little bit? Mm-hmm. So you pick up the phone and you call your buddy at the other firms. You say, listen, let me throw something out there to you. We can't control what they charge. But if we all agreed not to show any of their listings, they'd have a real hard time selling them. And if we agreed not to show any of their listings and they have a real hard time selling them, how long can they survive like that? And how many sellers would actually hire them? Does that sound like something you should be doing or engaged in? No, that is considered group boycotting. Don't do that. So don't form together as a group. Don't say, oh, none of us are going to hire this inspector because he's way too tough on an inspection. And the best way to get rid of him is just nobody hire him and then he'll go away. That's group boycotting. Don't do that. We all okay? So price fixing has to do with always saying this is what I charge, this is what we charge, and never this is the normal rate, this is the industry standard, this is the average rate. Don't say any of those things. None of that. And whereas group boycotting has to do with acting as a group and isolating somebody out of the market. When we talk about transactions and we start to split up the commissions very often, and this is just sort of a language reminder because we're going to start to use this language a lot. In a co-brokered transaction, how many firms are involved? Two. The listing firm represents who? The seller. And what is the name of the other firm involved in the transaction? The selling firm. And the selling firm represents who? The buyer in the transaction. The cooperating selling firm is how we might refer to them, or just the selling firm. That's the firm on the opposite side as the listing firm. Does that make sense for everybody? And so a cooperative transaction is all about sharing that commission between the two firms. That's important to understand because we're going to start to talk about the different types of listing agreements. And you have to understand how cooperative transactions work. Who does the commission belong to in most transactions? Doesn't belong to the so the commission belong to. Which firm? Not the firm. Which one? The listing firm. It's the listing firm who has signed a listing agreement with the seller, and the seller has agreed to pay the listing firm that commission. Does that make sense? Now, is some of that money going to make it to the selling firm? Yes, but it's not coming from the seller directly. Where is it coming from? The listing firm is sharing it or splitting it with the selling firm. That money flows from seller to listing firm and then gets split off between the listing firm and the selling firm. Does that make sense for everybody? That is a co-brokered transaction. Yes, ma'am. Sure. The commission flows from the seller to the listing firm. And then if the listing firm is cooperating, if they're offering a commission out to firms, why would they offer that? Why would they offer to cooperate? You need to understand the why, and then it'll make sense how it works. Why are they offering to share?
They're going to bring them a buyer.
They want us to bring them a buyer. They're saying, you bring us a buyer and we'll do what? We'll split our money with you. So they are offering that compensation up to other real estate firms saying, bring us a buyer. Does that make sense? So the commission flows from the seller to the listing firm, and then the listing firm splits it with the selling firm. Does that help? Okay, everybody good on that? That's a cooperative transaction. Yes, ma'am.
But the commission, like to the selling firm, it doesn't have to exactly be exact.
It does not have to be 50-50. When I say split or share, I do not mean it has to be 50-50. And what you find is that in some markets, and in some instances, it is rather common for the listing firm to keep a larger piece than what they offer out, than what they pay out. Raleigh happens to be one of those markets where that's a relatively common thing. And actually, by the way, I just committed a felony by saying that. Because what should I not have said? Erase the tape, right? What should I not have said? But it's common. I shouldn't say that, right? Because it shouldn't be common. It makes it sound like we all got together and decided to do the same thing, right? What I will tell you is, if you look at listings in Raleigh, then you will find on occasion where the listing firm is keeping a larger piece of the pie than they are offering to the selling firm. So it does not have to be an even split.
So that would be technically disclosed on our listing agreement that we are, like your commission.
The commission is going to be on the listing agreement. It's going to outline how much you're charging in total and how much you're going to share with a cooperating firm.
So if the cooperative firm, the selling firm, has a percentage that they're going to get, like 10%, that's, it has to be spelled out on the listing firm, say we will pay up to this percent or something. Do they get that technical or no?
I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Ask me again. Let me see if I can pick it up.
So commission, so the listing firm is saying, okay, we're going to get, I don't know, 25% from this.
Oh, I wish we could get 25%. I don't know what kind of listing agreement she's looking at, but I want to work for her. I'm telling you. How about 5%? Let's go with some.
Not that 5%, then they will give 2.5%
to a firm representing the buyer, right? So if they're charging a total of 5 and they're giving away 2.5, how much are they left with? 2.5 for themselves. Could they be charging 5 and be giving away 2? And in which case they would be keeping how much for themselves? 3. You're going to see that in the listing agreement. That's going to be outlined in the listing agreement.
So when we do a buyer agreements, they say, okay, my fee is 2.5%. They're going off of what so that's just their fee. That's just their fee.
So here, I now understand her question. Here's her question. So how does the buyer side know what's being offered, right? How about the MLS? What's the purpose of the MLS? For brokers to do what with one another? Exchange. Cooperate. Exchange information. So when I log into the MLS and I pull up a listing, guess what one of the pieces of information on that listing is going to be? How much of a cooperative commission they are offering on that transaction. Now to get deeper into your question, what if I have a buyer agency agreement where I say on my buyer agency agreement my firm's fee is 3%? Can I have one that says that? Yeah. Sure. Now here's what the buyer agency agreement says. It says we're going to try to get our fee first from a cooperative listing firm. But if we can't get it from them, we expect who to pay us? The buyer. So now we start showing the buyer property, and the house that the buyer ultimately makes a decision they want to make an offer on is offering a cooperative commission of 2.5%. Does the buyer owe us some money? Yes, they owe us the difference between what our buyer agency agreement says our fee is and what the cooperative commission is. So they would owe us the 0.5% difference.
Unless we're willing to drop it.
Unless we're willing to accept less, which a lot of brokers are. A lot of brokers will ultimately just say, I'm fine with the 2.5 and move on with their life. But there are some firms, especially in this market, because right now we're representing buyers of stuff. There are some firms out there right now that are putting 4% on their buyer agency agreement, knowing that they'll never see 4% offered as a cooperative side, and they're explaining to their buyer, and they're saying, listen, if you want us to be on call and show you the property the instant it comes on the market and be ready to make an offer and give you the best chance to get under contract on these things, we can't do it for 2.5%. We need to be paid more. And buyers are desperate right now, so guess what they're doing? They're paying it. They're paying it in some cases. Are selling agents on call?
I mean, like, do you set your own hours?
Do you set? Yes. You also set your own income, so you take that for as well. Pretty much, right? You know? Yeah, you can work as little as you want to. You can make as little as you want to, too.
Some buyers will want to call you at 10 o'clock at night.
10 o'clock? How about 2 a.m.?
What?
Oh, God. Yes. Absolutely. You got to put boundaries up for buyers, man. They wake up and take a poop at 3 o'clock in the morning and they want to call you and talk about that house they looked at yesterday afternoon.
That's what I.
And get mad when you don't answer. They sure do. They sure do. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have to set boundaries. You know, and I'm very cordial about it, but I do set boundaries with buyers. I say, now, okay, I'm available up until 10 p.m. You know, that's my boundary. You know, until 10 p.m., I'm available. You can text me, you can email me. Now, you can email me 24 hours a day, but I will actively look and respond up to 10 p.m. After that, it's going to have to wait till 8 o'clock the next morning. I mean, for me, I just set those boundaries because what that allows me to do is I don't really care if they call at 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm not going to do what? I'm not going to answer it. The phone's on silent, and I'll see that they called the next morning, and I'll deal with it then. But they know in advance that's when I'm going to deal with it. Because they do. They think you robo-man, you know, just available all the time. Okay? Are we good on this idea of a cooperative transaction here? So the last thing I want to do before we go home tonight is I want to talk about the 3 different types of listing agreements. You are going to see this as a test question. It's going to be in the national section of the exam. And it is traditionally something that students have struggled with, trying to identify the difference between these 3 different listing agreements. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to be real honest with you. The only one of these you're ever going to encounter in the real world is the first one, the exclusive right to sell. So in your notes, you ought to put by far the most common. This is the real one. This is the one you're going to do. That's why I got a big $sign beside it. Because this is the one that gets you and your firm paid under the greatest possible number of circumstances. Remember, the whole reason you sign a listing agreement is to get what? To get paid. This is a contract that says, if this happens, we owe you money. Well, you know what this type of listing agreement says? It says, if a buyer buys the house, we owe you money. Where does that buyer need to come from? Anywhere. We don't care. The exclusive right to sell listing says any buyer from anywhere, we owe you a commission. Does that make sense for everybody? Any buyer from anywhere. There is no differentiation. Now here's a graphic I made this weekend you don't have in your packet. Feel free to take a picture if you would like. I am trying to give you a visual representation of what I mean about any buyer from anywhere. There are 3 possible sources of buyers in any given transaction. That's what the 3 faucets up here represent. The buyer could come from the listing firm producing the buyer. So give me an example of the listing firm producing the buyer. Think about it. What does a listing firm do? Put it out there on the market, but give me an example of the listing firm producing the buyer directly. Think. It's not that hard. That's an agency answer. That's not, I'm talking about things they do to try to find a buyer. What do they do? An open house. If I hold an open house and a buyer comes in and makes an offer on that property, did not the listing firm produce that buyer? Yes. And so that buyer could come from that source, and here's our listing agreement. It's the funnel down here at the bottom. If that buyer comes from that source, is our listing agreement going to catch that?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So are we going to get paid?
Yes.
Yes. Here's another source of buyers. A cooperative firm produces the buyer. That's another potential source for a buyer, is it not? So this would be some other firm who represents a buyer, brings them to our listing, shows it to them, and then brings us a what? An offer. And if that buyer comes from that source, is it going to make it into our funnel? Yes. And therefore, are we going to get paid? Yes. Because the funnel is big enough to catch it, right? You with me so far? The third potential source for a buyer, believe it or not, the seller may do the work for us. When people have their house on the market, do they put flyers up at work? Do they tell their friends, oh, I'm trying to sell my house? Do they do that? Could that pay off?
Yes.
Sure. And if it does, is our funnel big enough to catch even that buyer?
Yes.
Yes. So here's what we're saying. If you have this type of listing, the exclusive right to sell, and you have to remember that. The exclusive right to sell listing, the funnel is so big that no matter where the buyer comes from, the listing firm's going to get what?
Paid.
Going to get paid. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? Does the visual help with that? Now, there's 3 types. Here's what's not going to change in these graphics as we move forward. The 3 sources of buyers is not going to change. What do you think is going to change? The size of the funnel is going to change. The funnel is going to get what size? Smaller. As we work ahead, the funnel is going to get smaller so that we start missing certain buyers with these other listing types. Are you following me on this? Okay? So let's talk about the next type. The exclusive agency agreement or exclusive agency listing. Now, it still has that word exclusive in it, which means the seller is only hiring how many firms? 1. It's exclusive. The seller has only hired 1 firm. Then why does our poor real estate broker look so sad here? Because he just found out what? He's not getting paid. Now here's the thing, I'm going to back up one. Is there any possible way he's going to look like that if he has this funnel, if he has this listing agreement? No, because it don't matter where that buyer comes from, he's going to get what? He's going to get paid. But he doesn't look happy. Because here's what he just found out. His funnel was too small. Because he signed an exclusive agency listing. And in an exclusive agency listing, the funnel no longer catches all 3 sources of buyers. It only catches what? 2 of them. If the listing broker or listing firm produces a buyer, is that still making it into the funnel?
Yes.
If a cooperative firm produces the buyer, is that still making it into the funnel? So in both of those cases, the listing firm still gets what? Paid. But look at what's not in the funnel anymore. If the seller does what?
Finds a buyer.
The seller finds the buyer themselves. So our buddy here is sad because he just got a phone call from the seller saying what? Come get your mess out of my yard because I sold my house. And I don't have to do what? Pay you.
You've done all that work.
And so here's the problem with this kind of a listing. It sounds fair. It sounds like, well, if they do it themselves, they probably shouldn't have to pay me. But here's the reality of it. How is the buyer most likely going to find out about the property? Your marketing, right? They're going to see it in the MLS. They're going to drive through the neighborhood. They know it's the house because they see what in the yard. Your sign that you paid for. They're going to stop and pick up a flyer. Who designed the flyer?
I did.
I did. Who paid for printing? I did. And when they get in the flyer, there's a seller watering his plants in the front yard. Now, if the seller has this kind of listing agreement, do they have a motivation to try to sell that property without you?
Yes.
Absolutely. What are they going to do as soon as they see somebody getting a flyer out of that box? Hey! What's going on? Well, I'm just getting a flyer out of the box. You want to see it? I'll show it to you right now. Oh, I don't know. I mean, because I would say no to that. I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. That's all right. If I want to see it, I got an agent. I'll call them. I'll get them to show it to me. Hold on. Let me tell you something. See, I got this listing where if I sell it, I don't have to do what? I don't have to pay anybody. And listen, buddy, I'll split it with you. See, I'm paying them 6%. See, if you want to look at it right now and you like it, I'll split it with you. I'll sell it to you 3% cheaper than I sell it to anybody else. Say it ain't so. People wouldn't do something like that, would they?
Yes, they do.
Of course they would. Which is why I said you won't actually see this thing in the real world. The one you'll see in the real world will be what? The exclusive right to sell.
Unless they got their license in Florida.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes,
So
ma'am.
that kind of like a FISBO, but you use an agency to list, I mean like.
Well, it's not really a FISBO. You're just saying,
I mean, you're selling it.
You're basically competing with your real estate firm to see who can sell it first.
Yeah, so.
Kinda. Does that make sense?
Just say you're doing it dirty.
Yeah, right. You're doing somebody dirty, most likely. Okay? We ain't done yet. The funnel shrinks again. The open listing.
Oh, Lord.
Now, we have lost the word exclusive. If you are in an open relationship, how many people are you involved with?
A lot.
Some of you sound like experts on that. I don't know,
Multiple.
More than
More than one.
one.
I did it all.
You've lost that exclusivity. There's no longer a commitment from the seller to only work with how many firms? One. They can work with as many firms as they would like. So you might see one property with all these signs in front of it.
Wow.
All of those signs out in front for that one property. Now, what do you think? Who's going to get paid? Whoever sells it. Whichever one of these ones somebody calls and buys the property, that's the one that's going to get paid. And that's what this looks like with the funnel. Because now the funnel has been shrunk down to only catch buyers from how many sources? One source. And that's if the listing firm itself produces the buyer. What if another firm produces the buyer? No commission. What if the seller sells it themselves? No commission. Do these graphics help? Yeah. Good. Good. Alice always says I needed that last time. She said that she always made me feel guilty. I'm trying to feel good about helping with something. She's like, we should have done that last time. I would have passed if you'd have done that last time. That's what she says every time, you know.
Can you send these to us?
No. Yes. 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 I'll be
Somebody
back.
take a picture for me
I'll read your.
because I got an iPhone and its storage is full, so.
Don't they have like an iCloud or something like that? I don't know how that works, but. Okay. Are we good on these? Now, I'm going to give you one more little, if the visuals don't work for you, I'm going to give you an auditory trick as well with this, okay? How many different sources of buyers do we have? Three, right? So I'm going to back up. Exclusive, right to sell. How many words are there? Three. How many buyers get you paid? All three of them. Exclusive agency. How many words are there? Two. How many buyers get you paid? Two. Open. How many words are there? One. How many buyers get you paid? One.
I like that.
Okay.
That's kind of smooth. Okay, can you kind of like...
Now she's mad at me. See, I can't win.
Can you back it up? Can you...
That could be taken a lot of ways. I don't know. I don't know. Can I?
Thank you, Travis. Man.
Is that the one you needed to see?
Yes, thank you. Well, the wolves come
But
out.
see what you would be missing out on if you got that Florida license and then you traded it for a North Carolina license. You'd have to also miss all this fun.
Your fun is players too.
I enjoy y'all. I truly do enjoy y'all. I have to admit, there are, now I have to say, I love most of my classes, but every once in a while you get one where it's like, oh. I had a night class last year, toward the end of last year, and I'm gonna tell you, it was, I'm never looking at my watch going. I would look at my watch thinking, okay, it's time for our first break. It's 7:15. What in the world happened, man? Are we good on these three types of listings? Okay, three types of listings are just, you'll see that on a test, the ability to identify the difference between the three. So make sure you're good with those. All right. Other than that, tomorrow night we will pick up and we will go over the exclusive right to sell from the North Carolina Association of Realtors, and then we will finish up chapter 8, okay? And I'll see you guys tomorrow night.
All I can